各位观众，欢迎大家再次的回到我们的2021年实验教育国际研讨会。那我们接下来要进行的是今天上午最后一个场次。然后呢，我们这次的主持人一样是刚刚第3个场次的主持人，容我再次介绍他。他是来自东华大学教育与潜能开发学系刘佩云系主任。那接下来主持就交给系主任了，谢谢您。
好的，谢谢大会，谢谢嘉轩哈。我们接下来又一场精彩的一个主题演讲哈。那我们的这个主讲者呢，也是这个在这个英语教育哈非常这个身体力行，就是推广了20多年的陈超明讲座教授，以及他的协同的发表者郑宗记教授。那陈超明讲座教授呢，他是前政大外语学院的院长，那现任呢治理科技大学的讲座教授。好，那郑宗记教授呢是国立政治大学统计系的教授。那演讲的题目呢是竹苗偏乡地区的英语教学模式，从教学到学习，从教完到教会的教学体验。那陈教授呢，他是佛罗里达州立大学的博士，他致力于英语教学呢，应该超过20年了吧？哈，那他也是2届的金钟奖的得主哈，那也有非常多的专著的发表，像英语及战力。那他带来一个非常革新的一个英语观念哈，就是其实我觉得郑教授陈教授是不是一直想传达说，就是 less is more 啊，就是我们教得多，不见得是学生真正学得会，那学会比老师教得多可能更重要。那他带着一群致力于改变英语教育的一个老师们一直在引领整个台湾英语学习的一个革命啊，比如说教材减半嘛，不赶进度啊，在偏乡里面就是让英语学习是有环境的啊，因为我们英语教育其实我们好像大家都对于那个环境，还有就是学了就是变成一个inner knowledge，就是一个惰性的知识，我们学了却不能去用。好，那老师呢，为了要这个展现就是英语教学，所以他今天会以全程的就是英语的一个分享。好，那当然我们有同步的口译。那我们是不是就把时间留给陈教授他带来的这个偏乡英语教学模式的分享
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction by the host. Since this is English education, so I'm supposed to present this kind of paper or my talk in English. The problem I want to explore today has been happening in Taiwan for more than decades. And my presentation has a long topic, is to explore a different teaching paradigm of English education in remote areas, Hsinchu and Miaoli counties. It's an experiment project with different kind of strategies. So I work together with Professor Zheng for more than 1 decade, more than maybe 11 or 12 years. So I'm going to share some of my experience, first-hand experience and on-the-side experience with Alf here and Professor Zheng just provide me with some of the statistical evidence to prove that this kind of paradigm might be working in the remote areas, especially the schools in remote areas in different parts of Taiwan. Okay, my talk will be divided into 4 parts. The first one is I'd like to give us a review of the Taiwan's English education. I'm not going to say that I'm questioning. I have to say that we just take this into account. If the current Taiwan English education program is working or not, is working to the people in the city schools or the people in the underprivileged areas in Taiwan. Then we have different kinds of practices. We have different kinds of pedagogies that we apply to the classrooms, but still not work. And the results do not prove quite promising. So maybe we can just have still the discussion about that. And the second part is about my experimental projects, which I intend to use to change the way of teaching practice in some areas in Taiwan. And I just introduce some of the theories and pedagogies from Singapore and the United States and try to give us or maybe stimulate your curiosities or stimulate some of your ideas. I wish my presentation would be a little bit inspiring, not only to English educators, but also to educators in other areas or in some of the experimental schools too. And of course, I need some kind of evidence. So there will be some kind of statistics, evidence to demonstrate the validity of my project. And of course, I will come to my findings and conclusions. So first one is I want to give you a very general views of what's going on in Taiwan's English classrooms. And of course, my question is, are we doing the right things? Now in Taiwan, in most of the elementary schools, besides 6 cities, which provide the students with English education starting from the 1st grade, and the other 16 counties or cities, ask the student to start learning English from the 3rd grade. But the problem is that they have only 2 hours per semester and 3 hours per semester in junior high schools. And we will get back to that a little bit later. And most of teaching methods are focusing on teaching English as a subject, not as a communication tool. So it's amazing that I have to say it's amazing. I think it's a very weird that most of the graduate students from high school or even from college who have learned English for more than 12 years cannot give a very short introduction in English. Whenever you ask them to communicate with me, or whenever you ask them to say something or to survive or to work in the foreign countries, they seem to be very reluctant to do that. English is only taught as a kind of subject. Most of teachers know the only way that they know is about teaching vocabulary, grammar, or reading skills, translating the English text from into Chinese for students to understand the meaning of the text. We use Chinese to teach English. That's very weird. 90% of the classrooms are conducted in Chinese, while very 10% of the interaction between the teachers and English and question and answers are conducted in English. If there is no, we just have a very common sense about English learning. If we don't have any kind of input, how can we have the output? And teacher tend to explain the text to students and asking students to memorize everything at home. Okay, go home. We're going to have a quiz tomorrow. And the results, what the results are, sending students, and most parents are very worried if they find that the students cannot learn English well, or when they come back home and check with the parents, I'm going to pronounce this word. I'm going to do this, I'm going to take a quiz. And the teachers have a big anxieties for their kids in learning the language. So what will happen next? They will send the student to language centers or after school learning centers, we so-called 补习班 or 安亲班 outside the campus, or even having the rich parents will hire the tutors at home to teach their students. The children from underprivileged families, most of them in remote areas, are going to suffer from poor performance in English classroom. You just imagine that if you have only 1 period on Monday in English, and you're going to use 40 minutes, and maybe you don't have too much time, to communicate with your teachers, and then you have to use about maybe more than 100 years to forget everything you learned on Monday and then come to the Tuesday class, and then you forgot everything. It was restart your learnings on Tuesday or Wednesdays, because there are only 2 periods. We know that the learning a language requires a continuous practice and a large amount of time of exposures to that kind of environment. If you only 2 periods, 1 week, how can you learn the language well? That is the problem. That is the educational problem. That is not the problem with the teachers or students or with the learning. That's the educational problems. So we have some kind of statistic, surveys to prove that the Taiwan English education does not function so well. There is a big gap in English learning performance caused by financial differences. More than 1/3 of students graduated from elementary school in remote areas fail to identify alphabets or phonics, since they have no access to these outside school resources. About 1/3 of students in junior high school fail to reach the standards required for next stage of education, even a much higher percentage in remote areas, in underprivileged areas. Based on my studies in the schools in the mountains of Maori, that rate even is up close to 70%. In Taiwan, maybe 60% or 70%. You just cannot imagine that in some of areas, 90% of students cannot recognize or identify the alphabets after 6 years of learning in English. What a terrible result. What is an unfair education system to those teachers, those students from the underprivileged families. And sometimes I have a joke with most of the teachers here in Taiwan. I say that the best students in your class are not really your students, but they already learn something from outside. The poor students are really your students because they have no access to the outside resources. So you are fully responsible for the poor performance by those students because they are your kids. And those best students, most of the time, they are not your kids. They already learn something from outside. So what's wrong with the pedagogy or the teaching practice in English education here in Taiwan? There are two trends in English education, and no matter how many pedagogy or theories we identify, we have some discussions in academia. I try to divide the theory in two parts. One is structure-based, the other is social-cultural theory. The structure-based, we used to believe that if students know the structure, know the grammar, know everything, and they will know how to speak English, how to use the language. And so we give them subject, verb, and adjective. We give them a lot of the formula, a lot of this kind of grammatic structures there, and then just follow this kind of structure to have some drills and practice, or sometimes exams in school, or practices, homework at home. And that is the way we are doing right now. The other theory just gives us different kinds of the thinking. We believe that we learn a language from the context instead of the text. If you don't have any kind of interaction or engagements with the outside world, how are you going to pick up the language? You never open your mouth. You learn English not from your teacher. You learn English from your peers, your counterparts, from the communities, from the interaction with your partners. We are real, authentic social environments. But unfortunately, in Taiwan, we don't have that kind of environment. We are not so far not bilingual country, right? Most of the language we use here in Taiwan is Mandarin Chinese. When you go outside the classroom, nobody speaks English. So what will happen if you want to apply the social cultural theories into your classroom, or using this as kind of the pedagogies to be practiced in classroom? What will you do? Okay, let's go back to the basic ideas. As a teacher, when you prepare your class, you have 4 questions to think, to take into consideration. What am I teaching? How will I teach it? Who am I teaching? You have to know what kind of level, what kind of competency level your student have, in order to give them the appropriate materials, in order to give them the appropriate content for them to understand. And then the most important part is, how will I know if the student understand what I am teaching? Do they learn well? So I want to just clarify some confusions here. We believe that when the teaching is done, then the learning is done too. It's not really. Teaching done doesn't equal learning well. So you teach, and are you sure that your students are learning, or they get distracted, or like look outside the windows and thinking of something else? Do you believe that they are focusing on your teaching? You give them the kind of structures and really pick up structure, and they can internalize that kind of structures and then make a better use of the structures later in the daily life. How are you going to transfer the knowledge you teach them into the skills they're going to practice, they're going to use in daily life? And another one is language knowledge doesn't equal language skills. You know the structures of the passive voice. Do you know how to use that? You know the subjunctive mood. Do you know how to use that? So we catch a lot of terminologies, linguistics, phonology, semantics, all these kind of knowledges in our mind. We are the language experts. Most of our high school graduates are language experts. They stuff their brain with a lot of terms, but they're stuck in their mouths. They can open their mouths to give a very short, to say, hello, how are you doing today? What's up? And even they cannot make a kind of order, or even to have a very casual chat with their foreign friends, or even type emails, in Instagram or in any kind of social medias. So language knowledge does not equal language skills. So what you can do to transfer the knowledge, we are teaching language in school, inside the classroom, but do we develop students some skills outside the classroom, with which they can take exam, they can practice in their daily life, they can apply to their careers, to their jobs in companies, or they can survive in foreign countries when they travel to Japan, Korea, United States, or UK. So the question is how to turn the language knowledge in school to skill used in daily life or even in exam. So there are two ways, the two key elements in how learning is completed. One is transferring, the other is returning. Transferring, what I mean transferring is that how can students just catch your knowledge and that knowledge will become layers, and they will never, and retaining means they will never forget. It will become a long-term memory. You can just go through so-called the hippocampus, into the brain and keep them, even though just like riding a bicycle, right? Once you learn how to ride a bicycle, you never forget how to ride. Just like swimming. You learn how to swim and you never get drowned, even though you haven't swum for more than 10 years. You know how to do that. That is retaining. Transferring and retaining are two key elements in terms of the learning complete. So here I'd like to introduce one of the way that is Singapore educational reform initiated in 2006. Okay, I don't know how much time do I have here. So there will be, they believe that they want to teach more of this and teach less of that.
我早上已经吃面包了，吃那个蛋卷了。
Teach the learner. You have to keep in mind, you are teaching students. You're not teaching English. This is what I just, I've been keeping telling my
这个意思是说脆很脆。上面我不知道，它应该这个是它牌子吧
？What we teach. You teach the
怎么念 来，你讲一下这个怎么念？
And you know the process of teaching is more important than anything else.
这个嘞
Okay, the second one is you have to engage your student in learning. It's not just give them a lot of drill and the practice. And I don't know. I just still keep picking up some of the noise.
S 哇，那这是什么？
Would you please someone?
不知道。那你知道了是这个就代表是这个食物是吗？
现在是黄黄的
是啊。
Would you please turn off your microphone, Miss? Yes. I'm sorry, I'm distracted. Sorry for that. So how are you going to teach? You just engage your students. Engaging students, you are not the teacher who dominates the whole class. You have to allow your students to practice, to learn themselves. You provide them with some tools. Do that. Okay. So why is the teach less, learn more models? It's about teaching better to engage your learners and prepare them for life rather than teaching more for tests or examination. It aims to touch the hearts, engage students, the minds of learners to prepare them for life, reaching to the core of education. Why we teach, what we teach, and how we teach. It's about the quality. It's not about the quantity. Okay, so a new paradigm in remote areas where outside school resources are not available. What can I do? I use some idea. I borrow some idea from the business world. I call it management by objectives. There'll be no more schedule rush. In elementary schools, I just set up some kind of targets for my teachers. Most of the students have to reach the targets, the standard line, the benchmark I set for them, like CFRA 1, alphabets, phonics, 100 more than 180 new words, and some basic sentence structure in daily life. For junior high school, about 12,000 words, and they can read the text themselves without the help from the teacher. Don't ask the student to say, repeat after me. Just ask the student to read to me. And use simple sentence, simple language, respond to teachers' questions. And the positive ways, some kind of practice, I ask my teachers to do on the right-hand side. We are talking about the competency. We are not talking about the schedules. Forget about the schedules. Competency is more important in English classroom. It's learner-centered. It's not the teacher's lecture. You're not supposed to talk a lot. You're supposed to allow the student to talk, to open their mouths. And you know that there are big different kind of level of your students' competency among the students. So you have to apply the so-called differentiated instructions. You're not going to use universal schedules to teach everyone from the different families with different kinds of level of competency. The most important point is learning by doing. You don't want students to memorize everything. You ask them to do something by doing. The task-based learning, not memory game. English learning is not a memory game. It's a task-based learning. They do that and they learn it. And you ask them to work together, collaborative learnings. And most important thing is that learning is complete in classroom, not in language centers or after-school learning classes. So everything should be done in classroom, so there will be no homework. And I organized the teacher community, asked all the teachers to prepare the class together, and we set up some kind of system for classroom observation. And after class, we have some discussion, and we set up some kind of mentor systems. And how I'm going to prove there's some kind of evidence to prove that our project or our experimental project is successful or not. We just have the delay post-test to make sure the language skills are internalized. Well, what does it mean, the delay post-test? I'm going to explain that later. So this we can summarize those ideas in one word. We call it situated learning. means that students are more inclined to learn by actively participating in the learning experience. How does it work? Transferring and returning. So we ask the teacher to teach, use about 30% of the time to teach, allocate about 70% of time for students to learn in class. Learning complete in class, and learning by using tasks, learning activity, including worksheet for them to practice in classroom, and they can just talk to each other. And then the last one is the evaluation for self-achievements. The test is not used to discourage your student. It is supposed to use to motivate your student, to give them some kind of achievement, some kind of content, to see themselves make progress. That is the way. When they feel I can get 80, 90, and 100%, they feel that they got some kind of confidence in learning for the next stage. Confidence is very important. Achievement, confidence are two of the very important aspects in pushing your students to move forward. If they get only 20, 30s each time in your exam, how are they going to feel contented or feel they don't have any kinds of achievements. They don't feel, they are frustrated. How can they just keep going and keep learning, right? So another two changes in the classroom is I asked all the teachers to teach English through English. Maybe it sounds impossible in the remote area, but we did that. We've been doing that for the last couple of years, and about 70% of the schools in our system in remote areas, English teachers use English to teach English. They don't translate. Maybe there will be some kind of video clip for you to do that. And they don't study grammar. They don't memorize vocabulary only. They read stories too. Okay, so the transforming project started from about 11 years ago in Taiwan and spread to more than 150 schools in remote area in Taiwan, including remote area in Taoyuan City, Hsinchu County, Miaoli County, and remote area in Kaohsiung cities. Okay, I don't have too much time. This is in Miaoli. Okay, to show you the some of these video clip. Maybe you cannot hear the song there. I don't know whether you can. Learning by doing, and the students, the teacher will be using the students as centers, differentiating instructions. I'm going to skip this video clip, but the teacher uses English most of the time to teach the students, and also to read, to have a lot of interaction with her. Okay, so these 4 years, I mean, I want to focus on two counties in Miaoli and Hsinchu. And the full project started from 2015, and then we are entering the second stage of another 4 years project starting from 2019, and it will end in 2022. Here's two counties. And we have two groups: a treatment group and control group. One junior high school and 7 elementary school. One junior high school, 8 elementary schools in Miaoli, and the control group. We pick up one or two schools in the city area, which has a lot of the outside school language learning resources, and Miaoli too, right? So we give them the test, the so-called delayed test. The test means that the test will be taken at the beginning of each semester, not the end of a semester, just the beginning of semester, after summer and winter breaks, to make sure that they don't forget what they have learned in the last semesters, to see that retaining is working there. So we give them 10 parts in exams, and of course the tests have been verified in terms of the reliability, validity, and discrimination. So starting from part 1 to part 10, starting from listening, writing, and readings, we just give them different kinds of variety of tests to see that the results, what our results are. And there will be a lot of these tables to show you the different values in terms of, I'm going to skip this part. If you have any questions later, they can just go back to all these tables and to ask Professor Zheng to explain to you. I just want to, this is our model and total corrections and part 1 and part 2, and we have different, I just summarize all this statistical evidence in this, let me see, in these findings. So the school in the treatment group don't perform well at the very beginning, even far worse than those in the control group. In regarding to parts 1 and 2, the positive estimate value for time indicates the oxygen of their progression on the learning process. The significant negative estimate value for treatment implies that those control group students perform better than those of the treatment groups in the total correction rate for the test. Of course, they are doing much better. But starting from part 5, we observe the different result for Hsinchu County. The estimate value for treatment is also negative but insignificant, which implies that there's no difference between the control group and the treatment group in the correction rate for this part. Starting from part 5, they have no outside support. I mean, those treatment groups have no outside support. You know, in contrast to the student in the control group, they have outside, they have 补习班, they have 安亲班, they have bilingual school to support them, they have tutor to support them. But in part 5, their performance, there is no difference between the control group and the treatment group in this part, in the performance. And part 8 and part 9 also confirms that the treatment of this project has been very successful because the treatment and control groups seem to have the similar results of this one. So my conclusion here, learning by doing provides underprivileged students with the opportunity to learn English inside classroom without counting on the outside school resources. And differentiation instruction helps teachers develop different strategies to help students learn on their own path. Collaborative or group learning not only help slow learners make progress in transfer skills under the help of the fast learners who also benefit from the team task to internalize and retain their learnings. And teacher community in remote area such as serve as an effective way of boosting the morale of the teachers in these areas and help to improve their teaching ability through classroom observation. Of course, the big problem is high mobility among teachers. A very common problem in remote area causes some damage to students' learning, such in the case of Miaoli. In Miaoli, we don't see too much progress in Miaoli. Why? In Hsinchu, the mobility is quite low, which shows the result. The result that the students in Hsinchu remote areas in the part 5 to part 10 of the delayed post-exam have performed as well as those in the cities. So teacher mobility is the big problems in the remote areas in some parts of East Taiwan, based upon our delayed post exams. Okay, I just want to stop here, and I believe that there will be some kind of new paradigm in English education that we want to set up. Don't teach English as a subject. Learning should be done. First one, learning should be done inside the classroom, not outside the classroom. And learning by doing through tasks and worksheet is a significant example of situated learning within the framework of social cultural theories, which indicate the best way of language learning is to use the language skill to do some tasks or worksheet, not just to learn the knowledge of language, such as grammar or vocabulary memory. Okay, I'm going to stop here. Thank you for your attention. And any questions or discussions are welcome here. And thank you for everything today. Okay, I'm starting here.
好，首先谢谢陈教授哈这么精辟的一个演讲。那陈教授首先提出了就是英语学习的问题，就是把它当作科目，而不是一个工具。那也很具体的提出了改变英语的一些做法，就 paradigm shift。 然后也提出了长期实验教学的一个证据。那回归到英语语言的本质了哈，因为语言的本质其实是沟通表达。好，所以如何透过就是我们 learning by doing 跟 learning by practicing 就学以致用的一个方式，让语言真正的达到它的回归它的本质的一个语言的沟通表达的一个功能。那陈教授长期的努力我们也看到很多的证据，就是应该造福了非常非常多的学生。那现在有一位就参与者提出一个问题哈，就是学校常常说浸润式的英语，除了英语课之外，在其他科目或学生日常生活中也让学生使用语文。那他想具体的请问陈教授，学校老师如何操作，或是有其他的一些建议？
Yes, of course. Right now we are promoting so-called bilingual classrooms or bilingual classes or even immersion classes, in some of these areas. And of course, the exposure to the English environment to practice their English is very important for students. 2 periods or 3 periods in learning a language is not enough. So the way how to practice one is not the way how most of the scholars or are expecting that the so-called all the teachers have to reach the level of B2. When you go enter the classroom in elementary school or in junior high schools, you're supposed to use the language that they can understand. You can use the body language. You can use a lot of the ways to allow your student to understand you, to know what's going on. I like to say that the bilingual class is not to teach the language. It's to allow the student to use the language they learn from the English classes. I don't think that immersion class or so-called the bilingual class is going to replace the English class. No, it's not. It's the way how you are going to practice using that kind of language outside the English classrooms. If we have successful English class, we don't need any kind of immersion classes at all. We don't need that. The problem is that in most of the English classrooms, especially in remote areas, the teachers seem to follow a kind of very traditional way, about the way that how I was taught about maybe 40 years ago. When I enter most of these English classes, I seem to enter some kind of the time tunnels, went back to about 40 years, 40 years ago classroom with my English teachers who, spoke very poor English there. They use Chinese and explaining your grammar, everything. But right now you enter the class, if you have a very good English classroom practice, maybe we don't need immersion classroom or immersion classes. But if you want to apply that kind of approaches, strategy in immersion classes, just remember that you must manage your language for your student to understand. You don't use the adult, you have to use the kids' English. Use your body language. Use a lot of props. Use video clips. Use online materials to give them students to enjoy the class, the music class, the PE class, the science class, and different kinds of the skill-based classes that they can enjoy and they can learn English. I call incidentally and accidentally. They are in PE class. They are not in your English class. So you don't have to teach them a lot. When they are exposed to that kind of environment a lot, they know how to pass the ball. They know how to to bounce the ball. They know how to shoot the ball, and they just pick up the kind of language unconsciously and subconsciously. Okay, don't worry about your English. All the subject teachers, your English good enough. I want you to use the language from elementary school and junior high school to teach your student. You are all graduate from college. Your English is sufficient enough to handle that kind of class environment. Okay, so don't worry about that. Just use the language that you know or your student know to manage your classroom. That's my suggestion there. Okay.
好，我们是不是在耽误1分钟的时间？因为有好几位参与者都提出一个非常重要的一个问题，就是请问陈教授，我们2030双语国家双语教育政策，您对于这个政策的一些看法，或者是您怎么样去评估这样的一个政策？就教于陈教授。
Okay, I think the policy is great. It's a good direction, but the strategies are, under examination. I think that you need to recheck the strategies that we are using right now. Right now the Ministry of Education or a lot of the teachers seem to use the so-called clear content and language integrated learning. I think that kind of strategy is totally wrong. In PE class, they are not supposed to teach language and content together. Are you going to teach 20 minutes English for physical education and ask students to basketball? You don't know the language, you still can play the basketball. So clear, the strategy is wrong, but the policy is correct. But if you want to, to really implement that kind of policy effectively, I believe that the oral skill, the weakness in our education is based upon the wrong way of practice in our classroom. We tend to read. We tend to teach students how to read with our own eyes. We are better to teach students how to communicate orally. How push the student to open their mouths to talk to you. That is the first thing, the first step we have to do that. So maybe my suggestion to the government is that maybe we can just, how to introduce the oral test in college entrance examination. Maybe that would change the way how we teach the English. Okay, that would maybe, I don't think that in 2030, Taiwan will become a bilingual country if you follow the way we are doing right now. I think that is a far, it's a long way to go. I don't like to say it's a mission impossible. It's a mission possible, but still a long way to go because you are not adopting the right strategies. Your policy is correct, but you try to tell our people that kind of bilingual class, a bilingual country is just the job, is a mission for English teacher. No, it's not. It's not a responsibility for English teacher. It's a responsibility for all the teachers. It's all the ministries, not a job for Ministry of Education. It's a job for Ministry of Education. If you don't have demand, how can you have a supply? Right? If you don't introduce a lot of foreign companies to Taiwan, what is the need for this kind of bilingual country? If you don't open Taiwan to international markets, how can you recruit more foreign talents into Taiwan? Let's take a look at Singapore, right? They adopt the English as an official language. We don't have to do that. We can use 2 languages as official languages, but you still have to other a strategy, a policy to support this kind of bilingual country policy, economics, finance, agriculture, sports, everything. So I think that this is a comprehensive policy. It's not the language policy. This is what I suggest, what I think, what I have in mind. It's our job. It's not just the English teacher's job. Okay, it's not the job for the mission or task for Ministry of Education. It's a mission for all the ministries in Taiwan. And they have to join in, actively participate in promoting using the language? How about in the banks, in the hospitals, in the hotels, in public transportations, in recruiting the foreign talents? Everything is included, should be included in this kind of bilingual country policy. But it seems that we just have a very limited views about this kind of policy. And you still have that kind of limited views of policy. We are going to make a big mistakes, and we never can get that far in 2030. That's my views on the policy. I just published several books, promoting that kind of idea, but nobody listened to me. I'm sorry.
好，谢谢陈教授哈，我也非常赞同，就是在考试是一个很大的一个关卡了哈，就影响到整个英语的教学还有我们的环境。也非常谢谢陈教授，就是非常诚恳，好，非常其实也是一个有点这个非常愿意把自己真心话说出来。那也希望我们的政策呢有全面的一个考量哈，真的是非常用心的，非常在英语教育上。投入了非常多的心血，也非常有实践力的一个非常棒的一个学者。好，那我们今天是不是这个场次呢就告一个段落？我们再次以掌声谢谢今天所有的讲者哈，这陈教授，还有叶教授，还有孟燕老师，谢谢，谢谢各位参与者哈，你们是最棒的，谢谢大家。我们期待下午就继续我们精彩的一个研究报告跟分享，谢谢大家。
好，谢谢刘主任，谢谢。那我们各位观众，我们上午场次的4场演讲呢，都已经顺利且非常精彩的结束了。那也很抱歉耽误到各位观众休息的时间。那我们下午1点半呢，请大家一样准时的回来。然后我们下午有3个分组的演讲，大家可以各自依照你有兴趣的组别去参与。然后我们最后会有一个综合座谈，那会邀请今天所有的主持人再回来这个综合座谈的会场，大家一起来聊聊有没有什么新的发现，我们继续保持对话。好，那就不耽误大家的午休时间，非常开心能够拥有190多位的朋友们一直在线上陪伴着大家，那么我们就用餐愉快，拜拜，谢谢。
刘主任哈，那下午的连结就是在那个手册，那